Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a very close look at this high security Medeco M3 biaxial residential deadbolt. I'm going to show you why this lock sells for as much as it does, which is around $200 for a double cylinder, compared to a typical pin tumbler deadbolt like you see here, which could be between $15 and $50. The deadbolt you see over here is made by Yale, and it happens to use the kwikset KW1 keyway. Before starting with the Medeco, first let me show you how a low to moderate security pin tumbler works. Don't need that. And you can see this shroud around the deadbolt is actually fairly thin. You'll see a difference compared to the Medeco in a minute. This key is a KW11, and just to show you that it works well, put it in. This used to be a 5-pin, and I modified it to 6-pin. If you look at the key for this deadbolt, you can see right here 6 cuts, so there's 1 pin there, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The cuts are all straight, so if you look down on it, you're going to see there's no angles to these cuts. It's just straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down. Let me disassemble the lock to show you exactly how this works when it's inserted into the cylinder. Okay, this is the core that's been removed from the lock. I want to now take this plug out of the center, slide that in. We're going to rotate just a little bit, and then I'm going to take this piece of plastic called a follower and slide it in. Alright, now what that's doing, inside here are springs and top pins. And it looks like what you see right over here in this image. Those top pins push down inside these holes. So when the key is out, you can see this hole is deep and this one's shallower. They're all different depths, but when the pins from the top are inserted, this cannot rotate inside that cylinder because it's going to be sticking up. When the key is inserted, the pins are going to rise up, and you can see they're perfectly flat with this plug, allowing it to rotate. So it's a very simple way this operates, and this is fairly easy to pick. Using a tension wrench, you would insert it into the keyway. You'd apply rotational force, just enough to get the pins to try and bind up just a little bit. And as you're doing that, you're going to reach inside with a tool like this, a hook, and just lift up on each pin until it gets flush, just like that. So right now you'd have the top pin pushing down. You would gently lift. Once it's in that spot, you'll hear a click. That's where it breaks. And then you're going to go to each one all the way down the line. And that's the only security for this lock. Once you have all these pins at the shear level, it will rotate. Now there is something that they do to make it harder to pick these locks. And let me show you that right now. Let me slide one of these out so you can see. See right there. Whoop. And I caught it luckily. You can see there's a spring, and it's pushing down on that. And what this is, that's called a spool pin. You can see it's shaped like a barbell, And the purpose of that is when you try and lift each one of those pins inside the keyway right here, it's going to hang up on these little ledges on the top and the bottom. So when you think you found the area between both, let me just lay one down to show you right here. So this is what you're going to see. This is exactly how it's set up. Right there. So when it's inside the cylinder here, the spring is right above this. It's pushing down on the spool, pushing down on the bottom pin. When the key comes in, it's going to raise the pin to the correct depth, so the shear line, which is the space between the bottom pin and the bottom of the spool, or the top pin, it's going to end up flush with the surface of this plug. When that happens, on all 5, or 6 in this case, the plug will then be able to rotate. Usually inside these pin chambers you'll find about 3 of these. Sometimes you may find 5. Security pins like you see here, the barbell or serrated type, are all that's employed inside a lock to make it harder for you to lift each one of these to the shear line. The Medeco is completely different, and that's what makes it virtually impossible to pick. Okay, let's push this one back in. Slide that forward. And let me just gently push down on it. So that's good. Let's pop this back in. And we're going to slide this the same way. Here we go. Okay, so that's back to normal. You can hear it engage. You just heard the springs pushing the top pins into the holes in the plug. Put the key in, and it's working fine. Now, one more thing to note. When you have a lock, if you notice there's a lot of play in the plug that goes inside the cylinder here, all right? If there's a lot of play, that means the tolerances are low, and when you have lower tolerances in a lock, it makes it much easier to pick. So this plug is actually not too bad. I could show you some that really wobble. And the Medeco has extremely high tolerances, which you're going to see in a minute. Alright, so let me push this to the side, and let's get going with the Medeco. Okay, here's a look at the Medeco, and this is one hell of a heavy deadbolt. This thing is solid. Look at the back of this. Look at how thick that brass is. Let's pull this off. Alright. And let's take a look at this now. And this is so heavy. Let's weigh this. Wow, 280 grams. This thing is solid. Now the other one was actually like a cast metal or a pot metal with brass. This one here is solid brass. Right here you can see the keyway and a closer look at that key. This is one of the smoothest locks I have ever used. The way it engages and disengages. Smooth as silk. The key you're looking at is a restricted high security key. In order to duplicate this key, you would have to prove ownership of the deadbolt. Over here you can see projections sticking out of the bottom of the key, and that's used to engage a spring-loaded mechanism inside the cylinder, which allows a sidebar to move inward. You can see the cuts vary just like the lower security key, but the difference is with this key they're not cut straight. You can see there's angles to those cuts. That's a different angle there, and it's different from the end. The purpose of that, not only will the pins be lifted to the shear line, but the pins are also being rotated in the process. The reason why the pins are rotated is because there's a sidebar that also keeps the cylinder from rotating, and in order for the sidebar to move inward to allow rotation of the cylinder, they must be in the correct position. Let's remove this one here. Yeah, you can see the difference in quality right away. This lock can take abuse from hammers, pry bars, you name it. And the other locks just can't tolerate that kind of abuse. So let's take this off. Alright, let's see. How do I actually put that in my pinning tray so I don't lose them? That comes off. You see the keyway, the back of it. Now what I need to do, let's see, using a hex key, let's take out one of these at a time. This is where the springs are, as well as the top and bottom pins. It's got this little hex socket set screw. So I'm going to put this in a pinning tray off to the side here. Put that in number 1. Let's tilt it out. Alright. We got the spring. And over here is a top pin. Just an ordinary top pin. No security in it. And over here is the bottom pin that comes in contact with the key. Let's take a very close look at this pin. And now if you look at this one, you're going to see it's cut on an angle, and there's also a groove cut up the whole length of that pin. You see it right there. And there's, on this side, there's a little tip that sticks out at the very top. Just like I showed you with the other lock, the spring pushes down on the top pin against the bottom pin. When the key is inserted, it's going to make contact, pushing this up to the right height, allowing rotation. Let me remove all the pins from the cylinder housing here. Alright, all the pins have been removed from the lock. You can see along the top row we have all the set screws and springs. On the next row, you can see the top pins, the second, third, and fifth. Use tapered spool pins like you see here. And on the bottom row, you can see all the angled cut pins that are different lengths. I'm going to slide this out very slowly because I want to show you something. Let me grab the key here. Let's see where it is. Don't want to screw it up. There it is right there. Alright, so now there's a sidebar. There's a sidebar right here. What that does, it engages the inside of the cylinder, preventing rotation. You can have all the pins lined up properly at the shear line, but if they're not rotated into the correct position with all the grooves, the sidebar will not be able to be pushed in, allowing rotation. So let me just take this out carefully. Okay, let's put this upright like this. Now most inexpensive deadbolts are very easy to drill out the shear line with the pins, but the Medeco lock has excellent protection against drilling. As you can see here, there are two hardened steel moon-shaped pieces that are inserted into the face of the lock. One is at the 12 o'clock position to protect against drilling out the shear line with the pins, and the other one is located at the 3 o'clock position to protect the sidebar from being drilled out. As you're going to see in a minute, the cylinder itself is also protected against drilling. Looking inside the cylinder housing, you can see both locations where the locking takes place. You have the pin chambers at the top, and off to the right side is the groove for the locking bar. Alright, this is a close-up of the cylinder. Let me point out each part. Right over here is a sidebar. Let me just gently pry this out of here. Okay. And you can see the sidebar has these two indentations. And there's a spring here and another one that stayed inside right there. Let me lay that down. There's the other spring. The sidebar is released when these two little tabs are moved out of position when the key is inserted. So when you slide the key in over here, whoop, let me move that spring. When you slide it in over here, what's going to happen, you see those two pieces move. When they move, they're going to end up in these spaces over here, and then the sidebar can push all the way inward. Every one of the pins must have the groove lined up perfectly inside each one of these windows, so each one of these protrusions on the sidebar can go inward. If just one of these pins are off, you're not going to be able to push the sidebar in, and you will not be able to open the lock. Let me show you the spring-loaded part here. Let me just pop this out carefully. There we go. And that's what it looks like. Alright, and let's flip it over. Here's a look at the cylinder much closer. There's all the pin chambers, and look what's right in front of them. 1, 2, 3 steel pins that were drilled into this cylinder. So if you try drilling right over here, you're going to end up hitting one of those steel pins, and it's going to make it extremely difficult. You will not find this kind of protection on inexpensive deadbolts purchased at Walmart, Home Depot, or Lowe's. To further increase the security against drill attacks, the first pin chamber, the top pin that's against the spring, is steel. This one right here. The steel pin protects all the brass pins behind it. Let me put all these pieces back onto the cylinder, insert the key with the pins, and show you how this works. Okay, everything's back together. Let me just show you how the sidebar works. If you try pushing it in, you see it only goes in that far. It's still sticking out outside this curve. So if the key was inserted, let's do that. And you can see this part of the key is going to make contact with this edge, pushing it to the left a certain amount to release the sidebar. Here we go. Just push just there so you can. Alright. And you can see right now it's in. This is trying to pop up. Oh, push it back down. And you can see it's in. If you look very closely at the pin chambers, you're going to see there's an area where it's not round on each one of these sides. And the purpose of that is the protrusion on the pin that I showed you earlier has to fall inside that spot. When it falls inside that spot, it's going to let the pin rotate maybe 30 degrees on each one. And if you don't rotate it into the correct position using the key, the sidebar slots will not line up with the pins. Just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to take this and insert it without looking at the position. Okay. And you can see it didn't go in. Alright. So what I need to do is rotate it until that little tip, there it is. See, it fell in. Now this piece here has the ability to move left and right about 30 degrees. Alright, the sidebar does not go in all the way. And if you look at each one of the pins, the openings are not in the right spot. They got to be pointing directly towards the sidebar on all of them. Take the key and insert it. You see them moving around. And they're going straight. You see them all lined up now? Every one of these openings are now facing directly at the sidebar. They're all perfectly flush, and the sidebar is all the way in. And that's how this lock works. It's a really good lock. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're not already a subscriber, be sure to click that subscribe button. And if you are a subscriber, Make sure you click the notification bell next to the subscribe button so you can be notified every time a new video is uploaded to my channel. Thank you very much for watching.